Weeks passed, and the desert began to heal. The scars left by the alien ship's destruction were still visible, a massive crater where the vessel had once stood, but life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Birds chirped in the early mornings, and the wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush. Yet the people who called this harsh land home knew things would never be the same. They had faced an enemy from beyond the stars and survived, but the memory of that fight lingered like a shadow. Jack Harper stood on a hill overlooking the ranch, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The stone Joseph had given him hung from a leather cord around his neck, its faint warmth a constant reminder of what they had endured. Beside him, Lisa rested her head on his shoulder, her presence a quiet comfort. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked softly. Jack didn't answer right away. He stared at the horizon, where the sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. "Maybe," he said finally. "But if they do, we'll be ready." The group had spent the days since the explosion preparing for the possibility of another attack. Sarah Klein took charge of organizing patrols, teaching those willing to learn how to handle weapons and set traps. The cave system, now dubbed the Sanctuary, became a refuge and a training ground. Its glowing symbols continued to pulse with energy, as if waiting for the next time they would be needed. News of the battle spread far beyond the desert. Governments sent investigators, scientists, and reporters, all eager to understand what had happened. But Jack and the others kept their answers simple. They spoke of resistance, of using the land to their advantage, and of standing together when it mattered most. They didn't mention Joseph or the stones, not because they wanted to keep secrets, but because some things felt too sacred to share. One evening, as the group gathered around a campfire outside the barn, Sarah leaned back against a log, her shotgun resting across her lap. "We did good," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not just for us, but for everyone." Lisa nodded, staring into the flames. "Still, I can't stop thinking about those people on the ship, the ones we couldn't save." No one spoke for a moment. The weight of that loss hung heavy in the air, a reminder that even victories came with costs. Finally, Jack cleared his throat. "We can't change what happened, but we can make sure it doesn't happen again." The others murmured in agreement. They had learned hard lessons during the invasion, about survival, about sacrifice, and about the strength found in unity. Each of them carried those lessons like armor, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the fire crackled and sparks drifted upward, Jack pulled out the stone and held it up to the light. Its glow seemed brighter tonight, almost as if it were alive. "This isn't over," he said quietly, "but we've proven something important." "What's that?" Daniel asked, leaning forward. "That Earth isn't theirs to take," Jack replied. "It's ours, and we'll fight for it, no matter what." The words settled over the group like a promise. They were farmers, ranchers, mechanics, and survivors, not soldiers, but they had become something more. They were defenders of their home, protectors of the land that had shaped them. In the weeks and months that followed, life in the desert returned to a semblance of normalcy. Cattle roamed the hills, crops grew in small patches of fertile soil, and children played under the wide open sky. But beneath the surface, preparations continued. Weapons were stockpiled, traps were refined, and stories of the battle were passed down, becoming legends in their own right. One night, as Jack stood alone on the hill once more, he looked up at the stars. They twinkled innocently, distant and unreachable. Somewhere out there, other ships might be watching, planning, waiting. But Jack wasn't afraid. He touched the stone hanging around his neck, feeling its steady warmth. "We showed them we're tougher than they thought," he whispered to himself. "And next time, we'll be ready." The desert stretched endlessly before him, vast and unyielding. It was a harsh place, full of danger and hardship, but it was home. And no matter who or what came next, the people of the desert would stand together, united by the spirit of resilience that defined them. Whatever the future held, they would face it with courage, determination, and hope. The explosion lit up the desert like daylight, a massive fireball erupting from the alien ship as it collapsed in on itself. The ground shook violently, sending waves of sand spiraling into the air. Jack and the others stumbled forward, shielding their faces from the heat and debris. Behind them, the mothership groaned and twisted, its once sleek surface crumbling into molten fragments. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire world might be consumed by the inferno. When the shaking finally stopped, the group slowed to a halt, gasping for breath. Sarah dropped to her knees, clutching her side, while Lisa helped Rachel steady herself. Daniel leaned against a rock, his face streaked with soot but alive with disbelief. Did we really do it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Jack didn't answer right away. He turned back toward the wreckage, watching as the last remnants of the ship melted into the earth. The glow of the explosion faded slowly, leaving behind a smoldering crater that glimmered faintly in the moonlight. It was over. The aliens' base was destroyed, their connection to Earth severed. But victory felt hollow, weighed down by the cost of what they had lost and what they had seen inside the ship. Lisa broke the silence, her voice trembling. Those people, the ones they were experimenting on, were any of them still alive? Jack shook his head, guilt tightening his chest. We couldn't save them. Not this time. Sarah stood up, brushing dirt off her hands. Her expression was hard, unreadable. We saved everyone else. That's what matters now. But even as she said it, the words rang hollow. They had struck a blow against the invaders, but the images of the captives, hooked up to machines, drained of life, would haunt them for years to come. The aliens hadn't just come to conquer. They had come to harvest, to take everything Earth had to offer without care or remorse. As the group caught their breath, Joseph Redhawk appeared once more, stepping silently out of the shadows. His presence was unexpected but somehow comforting. He carried no weapon, no tool, just his walking stick, carved with the same symbols that had guided them through the cave. "You have done what few could," he said, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "But the fight is not yet finished." Jack frowned, turning to face him. "What do you mean?" "The ship is gone. Their link to Earth is broken." Joseph nodded slowly. "Yes, but there are others. More ships, more invaders. This was only the beginning." The weight of his words settled over the group like a storm cloud. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Still, Jack straightened, his jaw tightening with resolve. "Then we'll keep fighting. If they come back, we'll be ready." Joseph studied him for a long moment, then reached into his pouch and pulled out another stone, similar to the one Jack had used earlier. He held it out, offering it silently. "This will guide you when the time comes. Trust the land, and it will protect you." Jack took the stone, feeling its faint warmth in his palm. "Thank you," he said simply. Joseph didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the hills, disappearing into the darkness as quietly as he had come. The group watched him go, unsure if they would ever see him again, but grateful for his help all the same. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the survivors began the long journey back to the ranch. The desert stretched endlessly around them, vast and unforgiving, but also full of resilience. It had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and in doing so, it had shown them their own strength. When they reached the barn, the others greeted them with cheers and tears. News of the ship's destruction spread quickly, bringing hope to those who had thought all was lost. Jack stood atop a pile of rubble, looking out at the weary but determined faces gathered below. "We showed them we're not easy prey," he said, his voice firm despite the exhaustion in his bones. "And if they come back, we'll show them again." The crowd erupted in agreement, their voices carrying across the open land. For now, they were safe. But they knew better than to let their guard down. The aliens had underestimated humanity once, and they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the desert seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Life would go on, battered but unbroken. And though the scars of battle would remain, so too would the spirit of those who refused to surrender. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "What do you mean?" Jack asked, meeting the old man's steady gaze. Joseph pointed to the glowing symbols on the walls. "These markings hold ancient knowledge. They are not just tools. They are warnings. The invaders seek Earth's core energy. If they succeed, this world will die." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "How do we stop them?" "Their ship is the key," Joseph replied. "Destroy it, and you sever their link to your planet. But beware, the cost may be higher than you expect." Before anyone could ask more questions, Joseph turned and walked back toward the shadows, disappearing as quietly as he had come. The group exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no time to dwell on his cryptic words. The mission ahead required all their focus. That night, under the cover of darkness, Jack, Sarah, Lisa, and 2 others, Daniel and Rachel, set out for the alien ship. They moved cautiously through the desert, sticking to the rocky terrain to avoid detection. The stone guided them, its glow intensifying as they drew closer to their target. When they reached the outskirts of the landing site, they paused to observe. The massive spacecraft loomed above them, its surface shimmering in the moonlight. Alien guards patrolled the area, their movements sharp and precise. Energy barriers surrounded the ship, crackling with power. "We'll never get past those shields," Rachel whispered, her voice tense. Jack studied the scene carefully. "Not unless we use the stone again." He held it up, focusing on the faint hum that resonated in his hand. Slowly, the energy barriers began to flicker, creating gaps large enough for them to slip through. "Now," Jack hissed. The group moved quickly, darting between the patrols and slipping past the weakened barriers. Inside the ship, the air was cold and metallic, humming with an unnatural energy. The corridors were narrow and brightly lit, lined with strange symbols similar to those in the cave. Sarah led the way, her shotgun ready. "We need to find the core," she said. "That's what they're after. If we blow it, the whole ship goes down." They navigated the maze-like interior, avoiding encounters with the aliens whenever possible. At one point, they stumbled upon a room filled with strange equipment, devices that pulsed with green light, connected to tanks holding human captives. Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "They're experimenting on people," she said, her voice trembling. Jack clenched his fists, anger surging through him. "We don't have time to save them now. But we'll make sure this ends tonight." Finally, they'd reached the heart of the ship, a massive chamber containing a glowing orb suspended in midair. It pulsed with raw energy, feeding the vessel's systems. Sarah set the explosives around the core, working quickly as the others kept watch. "Done," she said, backing away. "Let's move." As they retraced their steps, alarms blared throughout the ship. The aliens had discovered their presence. The group ran, dodging blasts of energy as the creatures pursued them. Just as they reached the exit, the first explosion rocked the ship, sending shockwaves through the ground. "Go, go, go," Jack shouted, urging the others forward. They sprinted across the desert as the ship erupted behind them, lighting up the night sky like a second sun. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then silence fell once more. The group gathered inside the cave, their bodies weary but their spirits lifted by the small victory. The stone on the pedestal still glowed faintly, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat. Though the immediate threat had passed, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens returned. They needed a plan, one that would strike at the heart of the invasion. "We can't stay here forever," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "They'll figure out what we did and come back stronger." Jack nodded, his expression grim. "Then we hit them first. If we can get to their ship, maybe we can end this." Lisa looked up from tending to Ethan's wound. Their ship. That thing is huge. How are we supposed to get inside? Jack turned to Joseph's stone, still resting on the pedestal. This thing disrupted their signals. Maybe it can help us get close enough to plant explosives. If we destroy the ship, they'll lose their base and their advantage. Sarah frowned, considering the risks. It's dangerous. We'd be walking straight into their territory. But if it works... It has to work, Jack interrupted. We don't have another option. The group spent the next hour preparing for the mission. They scavenged supplies from the cave and nearby ruins, old fuel cans, wires, and scraps of metal, to create makeshift bombs. Sarah rigged the devices together, adding timers and triggers. Meanwhile, Jack studied the tunnels leading upward, searching for a route that would bring them closest to the alien ship. As they worked, Joseph Redhawk appeared once again, stepping silently into the chamber. His presence startled no one. Somehow they had expected him to return. "You've done well," he said, his voice calm but approving. "But the final step will require more than strength." The battle outside the cave intensified as Sarah and her team fought to hold the aliens at bay. Bullets ricocheted off the creature's armor, and energy beams lit up the darkening desert like flashes of lightning. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but their determination never wavered. Every shot fired, every trap triggered, was a message. They wouldn't give up without a fight. Inside the chamber, Jack and Lisa worked frantically to understand the glowing symbols etched into the walls. The patterns shifted constantly, almost as if responding to their presence. Jack ran his fingers over the markings, feeling a faint vibration beneath his skin. "These aren't just decorations," he muttered. "They're part of something bigger." Lisa nodded, her eyes darting between the symbols and the tunnels branching off from the chamber. Joseph said the aliens rely on signals. Maybe these markings can interfere with them somehow. Jack's mind raced. He remembered Joseph's words about disrupting the invaders' connection to their ship. If they could harness the energy in this place, they might be able to turn the tide of the battle. But how? The answer eluded him, buried somewhere in the glowing patterns that seemed to pulse with life. Outside, Sarah shouted orders to her team, urging them to fall back deeper into the cave system. The aliens had breached the entrance, their weapons cutting through the makeshift barriers like paper. One of the creatures stepped inside, its glowing eyes scanning the dimly lit tunnel. Sarah fired another round, forcing it to retreat momentarily, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed the group. "We need to move," she yelled, motioning for her team to follow her into one of the side tunnels. As they retreated, she glanced back toward the chamber, hoping Jack and Lisa had made progress. Back in the central room, Jack finally noticed something crucial. The stone Joseph had given them wasn't just a key, it was a conduit. When he held it close to the pedestal, the light intensified, spreading outward in waves. The vibrations grew stronger, resonating through the chamber and into the tunnels beyond. "Lisa, help me," Jack called out, positioning the stone firmly on the pedestal. Together, they adjusted its placement until the light stabilized, forming a steady beam that shot upward through the crack in the ceiling. Almost instantly, the air changed. A low hum filled the chamber, growing louder by the second. Outside, the aliens froze mid-step, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Their weapons flickered, emitting weak bursts of energy before sputtering out entirely. Confusion rippled through their ranks as their connection to the mothership was severed. "It's working," Lisa exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. "We've disrupted their signals." Jack didn't waste time celebrating. He grabbed his rifle and motioned for Lisa to follow him. "Let's push them back while we have the advantage." They joined Sarah and the others in the tunnels, where the aliens were struggling to adapt to the sudden loss of communication. The humans launched a counterattack, firing from hidden positions and using the narrow passages to their benefit. The creatures, disoriented and cut off from support, began retreating toward the surface. But the victory came at a cost. One of the younger members of the group, A boy named Ethan had been injured during the fighting. His leg was burned from an alien weapon, and though he tried to hide his pain, it was clear he needed medical attention. Lisa stayed behind to tend to him while Jack and Sarah led the charge forward. By the time they reached the cave's entrance, the aliens were gone, disappearing into the night like shadows. The desert stretched endlessly before them, silent once more. For now, the immediate threat had passed, but everyone knew it was only temporary. The invaders would regroup, and when they returned, they would come stronger. Jack stood at the mouth of the cave, staring out at the horizon. The stone's glow had dimmed slightly, but its power lingered in the air. "We showed them we're not easy prey," he said quietly. Sarah joined him, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. "And we'll keep showing them, until they leave or we make them wish they had." Behind them, the cave remained illuminated, a beacon of hope in the unforgiving desert. It was proof that even in the harshest places, humanity could find strength and ways to fight back. The group pressed on through the desert, their footsteps muffled by the soft sand. The stone Joseph had given Jack seemed to hum faintly in his hand, as if alive with energy. Though none of them fully understood how it worked, they trusted the old man's guidance. Every step felt heavier than the last, exhaustion weighing down their bodies, but the thought of giving up never crossed their minds. They were fighting for more than survival now. They were fighting for the land itself. As they moved, Sarah studied the terrain carefully, her sharp eyes scanning for signs of the hidden caves Joseph had mentioned. "Look for dips in the ground," she instructed the others, "or cracks where water might have flowed once." It wasn't long before Lisa spotted something, a dark opening partially hidden beneath a cluster of rocks. She pointed it out, and the group gathered around cautiously. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through, but the air coming from inside felt cooler, almost inviting. "This has to be it," Jack said, gripping the stone tighter. He led the way, ducking into the cave with Sarah close behind him. The interior was dimly lit by the fading sunlight streaming in from the entrance, but as they ventured deeper, the walls began to shimmer faintly. Strange markings, similar to those on the stone, glowed softly along the rocky surfaces. "Do you think this place is natural?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Jack admitted, "but it feels important." They continued exploring until they reached a larger chamber. In the center stood an ancient structure, a pedestal carved from smooth stone, its surface etched with intricate patterns. The glowing symbols matched those on the stone Joseph had given them. Jack approached slowly, holding the small object in his palm. As he placed it onto the pedestal, the room came alive with light. The markings brightened, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. "What did you do?" Sarah asked, her tone a mix of awe and concern. "I didn't do anything," Jack replied, stepping back. "The stone did it." The light spread outward, illuminating tunnels branching off in different directions. One tunnel sloped downward, leading deeper underground. Another stretched upward, toward what looked like a crack in the ceiling that let in fresh air. It was clear the cave system was vast, far bigger than they had imagined. "We can use this," Sarah said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "If we set up here, we'll have the high ground. And those tunnels could help us move without being seen." Jack nodded, agreeing with her assessment. But before they could make any plans, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The aliens had found them, or at least, they were close. The group froze, listening intently as the sound grew louder. The creature's weapons emitted faint hums, cutting through the silence outside. "We need to act fast," Jack said, his voice firm. "Sarah, take half the group and block the main entrance. Use whatever you can find to slow them down. Lisa and I will stay here and figure out these tunnels." Sarah didn't argue. She grabbed a few volunteers and hurried back toward the cave's mouth, leaving Jack and Lisa alone in the chamber. As they worked to map out the tunnels, Lisa noticed something odd about the glowing symbols. They seemed to shift and change, forming patterns that resembled waves or ripples. "Jack," she said hesitantly, "do you think these are connected to what Joseph said about disrupting their signals?" Jack frowned, studying the markings closely. "Maybe. If we can figure out how to use this place against them, we might stand a chance." Outside, the aliens closed in, their glowing forms casting eerie shadows across the sand. Sarah and her team worked quickly, piling rocks and debris to create makeshift barriers. When the first alien stepped into view, its weapon raised, Sarah fired a warning shot. The creature hesitated, then signaled to its companions. The battle was about to begin again. Back in the chamber, Jack and Lisa focused on deciphering the symbols. Time was running out, but they knew one thing for certain. The desert wasn't just a battleground. It was a weapon, and they intended to use it. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert, the humans found themselves in a desperate situation. The aliens were relentless, their glowing eyes scanning every crevice and shadow. Though the traps and ambushes had slowed them down, the creatures showed no signs of giving up. For every step the humans took back, the aliens pressed forward twice as hard. Jack Harper crouched behind a boulder, his rifle resting on the rough surface as he tried to steady his breathing. His shoulder ached from the recoil of repeated firing, and his throat was dry from the heat and dust. Beside him, Lisa handed him a water bottle, her hands trembling slightly. "We can't keep running forever," she said quietly. "We won't have to," Jack replied, though even he wasn't sure how much longer they could hold out. The group was exhausted, their supplies dwindling with each passing hour. But something inside Jack refused to give up. He glanced over at Sarah Klein, who was busy setting up another trap using scraps of wire and nails. Her face was streaked with dirt, but her focus never wavered. She was the backbone of their resistance, keeping everyone moving when all they wanted to do was collapse. It was then that Jack noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A lone figure approached cautiously from the direction of the rocky hills. At first, Jack thought it might be another alien scout, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was human, an elderly man with weathered skin and sharp eyes. He wore traditional Native American clothing, his silver hair tied back in a neat ponytail. In one hand, he carried a walking stick carved with intricate designs. "Who are you?" Jack demanded, raising his rifle slightly. The man raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "My name is Joseph Redhawk," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've been watching you fight these invaders." Jack lowered his weapon but remained wary. "Watching? From where?" Joseph pointed toward the hills. "I live nearby. My ancestors walked this land long before your people came. And long before them, others came from the stars." He paused, studying Jack's face. "These invaders are not the first, nor will they be the last." Sarah joined them, her shotgun slung over her shoulder. "What do you know about them?" she asked bluntly. Joseph nodded, as if expecting the question. "They seek the heart of this world, the energy within its core. It is why they have come. But they do not understand this land, nor its spirit. That is their weakness." Jack frowned. "Spirit? What does that mean?" "It means the desert fights back," Joseph explained. "The heat, the sand, the wind, they are not just obstacles. They are part of something greater. If you listen, they will guide you." Though skeptical, Jack couldn't deny the truth in Joseph's words. The harsh environment had already proven challenging for the aliens. Their armor cracked under the strain, and their weapons faltered in the heat. Perhaps there was more to the land than they had realized. Joseph continued, "There are places here, hidden caves, underground streams, that could aid you. Use them wisely. And remember, the invaders rely on signals, like echoes in the air. Disrupt those, and you disrupt them." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Signals? You mean their communication?" "Yes," Joseph replied. "Their connection to their ship is their lifeline. Break it, and they will falter. The old man reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out a small stone etched with symbols. He handed it to Jack. "This will help you find what you need. Trust the land, and it will protect you." Before anyone could ask more questions, Joseph turned and began walking back toward the hills. "Wait," Jack called after him. "Why are you helping us?" Joseph stopped but didn't look back. "Because this is my home too. And because I believe you can win." When he disappeared over the ridge, the group stood in silence, unsure of what to make of the encounter. But Jack clutched the stone tightly, feeling a strange warmth radiating from it. "We follow his advice," he said finally. "If we're going to survive, we need every advantage we can get." With renewed determination, the group moved deeper into the desert, guided by the old man's words. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The aliens followed, their glowing forms cutting through the growing darkness. The humans knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, they felt a glimmer of hope. The desert was unforgiving, but it was also full of secrets, and perhaps, just maybe, it was on their side. The aliens didn't waste time. After regrouping, they launched a second attack, this time with more force and precision. Their weapons fired beams of intense light that cut through the air like knives, leaving scorch marks on anything they touched. The barn shook as one of the blasts struck the outer wall, splintering the wood and sending shards flying. Inside, the humans ducked for cover, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. "They're getting smarter," Sarah muttered, reloading her shotgun. Her hands moved quickly, but her voice betrayed her growing concern. "We can't keep trading hits like this." Jack nodded, his jaw clenched tight. He peeked through another gap in the wall, watching as the aliens advanced. Their movements were slow but deliberate, their clawed feet sinking into the loose sand. It was clear the terrain was working against them. The shifting ground made it hard for them to move quickly or maintain balance. But their weapons gave them an edge, and the humans were running low on ammunition. "We need to draw them away from the barn," Jack said, turning to the group. "If we can lure them deeper into the desert, we might stand a better chance." Lisa frowned, shaking her head. "That's too risky. If we leave the barn, we'll be exposed." "It's our only shot," Jack replied firmly. "They're too close here. Out there, we can use the land to our advantage." Sarah stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "He's right. We can't hold this position forever. If we fall back now, we can set up another ambush, maybe even trap them." The group hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. No one wanted to leave the relative safety of the barn, but everyone knew Jack and Sarah were right. Staying put would only lead to disaster. With a collective nod, they began gathering what little supplies they had left, extra bullets, water bottles, and tools, and prepared to make their move. Under the cover of smoke bombs Sarah had rigged earlier, the humans slipped out of the barn and into the open desert. They moved in small groups, sticking close to rocks and dunes to avoid detection. The aliens, focused on breaching the barn, didn't notice the retreat immediately. By the time they realized their prey had escaped, the humans were already halfway to their next position. "Over there," Jack whispered, pointing to a cluster of jagged rocks ahead. The formation created a natural maze, perfect for slowing down pursuers. "We'll set up there." The group hurried toward the rocks, taking cover behind boulders and shallow crevices. Sarah quickly began rigging traps using tripwires and old cans filled with nails. Jack and a few others positioned themselves at key points, ready to fire if the aliens followed. It wasn't long before the creatures appeared, their glowing eyes scanning the area. They moved cautiously, wary of another ambush. One of them stepped into a patch of loose sand and struggled to free itself, its movements sluggish. Another raised its weapon, firing blindly into the rocks. The beam struck a boulder, sending fragments flying. "Now," Jack shouted. The humans opened fire, their shots echoing across the desert. Bullets pinged harmlessly off the aliens' armor, but the sudden barrage forced them to scatter. Sarah triggered one of her traps, releasing a cascade of sharp metal scraps that caught one of the creatures off guard. It staggered, its exoskeleton cracking slightly under the impact. But the aliens adapted quickly. They spread out, using their numbers to flank the humans. One of them climbed onto higher ground, gaining a better vantage point. From there, it fired a concentrated beam of energy that struck a rock near Lisa, sending her sprawling backward. "Lisa," Jack yelled, rushing to her side. She was shaken but unharmed, though her rifle lay broken in the sand. "We need to move," Sarah called out, tossing Lisa a spare handgun. "They're pinning us down." The group retreated farther into the maze of rocks, leading the aliens deeper into the desert. The sun blazed overhead, baking the ground and sapping everyone's strength. The aliens seemed less affected by the heat, but their movements were still hindered by the uneven terrain. As the chase continued, Jack noticed something strange. The aliens' weapons were beginning to falter, their energy beams dimming slightly. The intense heat and constant use appeared to be draining their power. A flicker of hope sparked in his chest. "They're not invincible," he said to Sarah, who was crouched beside him. "If we can keep this up, we might wear them down." Sarah nodded, a grim smile tugging at her lips. "Then let's make sure we do." The battle raged on, the humans fighting not just for survival, but for every inch of ground they refused to surrender. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and unforgiving. But it was their home, and they weren't about to let anyone, or anything, take it from them. By dawn, the desert was bathed in a pale golden light, the kind that made everything look softer, almost peaceful. But there was nothing peaceful about the situation unfolding at Jack Harper's ranch. The group of locals had spent the night fortifying their position and preparing for the worst. Sleep had been scarce, and the air was thick with tension. Everyone knew the aliens wouldn't stay quiet forever. Sarah Klein moved among the group, checking traps and ensuring the makeshift defenses were ready. She carried a toolbox slung over one shoulder and a shotgun tucked under her arm. Her movements were quick and efficient, driven by years of discipline from her time in the military. "We need to stay alert," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If they come, it'll be fast." Jack stood nearby, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. His face was lined with worry, but he kept his voice steady when he spoke. "They're out there," he told the group. "I saw lights moving last night. They're looking for us." The mention of the aliens sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Most of the people gathered had never faced anything like this before. Farmers, ranchers, and shopkeepers weren't trained for war. Yet here they were, armed with whatever they could find, ready to defend their homes against an enemy they barely understood. As the morning wore on, the first sign of trouble came. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't the sound of the mothership this time. It was something smaller, closer. Moments later, 3 alien scouts appeared on the ridge overlooking the ranch. Their insect-like bodies shimmered in the sunlight, and their glowing eyes scanned the area with unnatural precision. "They're here," someone shouted, panic rising in their voice. "Stay calm," Jack barked, raising his rifle. "Stick to the plan." The plan was simple. Use the terrain to their advantage. The aliens might have advanced technology, but they were unfamiliar with the desert. Loose sand, hidden pits, and narrow pathways could slow them down. Sarah had rigged several traps along the most likely routes the aliens would take, hoping to catch them off guard. The creatures moved cautiously, their clawed feet sinking slightly into the soft ground. One of them raised a device that emitted a high-pitched whine, scanning the barn and surrounding structures. Another aimed a sleek weapon at the barn doors, its barrel glowing faintly. "Now," Jack yelled. At his signal, Sarah triggered the first trap. A tripwire snapped taut, releasing a cascade of heavy rocks from a nearby hill. The stones tumbled down, forcing the aliens to scatter. 2 of them managed to dodge, but the third was struck, knocked off balance by the impact. Its exoskeleton cracked slightly, revealing a faint green glow beneath. The humans opened fire, their shots echoing across the desert. Bullets and buckshot ricocheted off the aliens' armor, doing little real damage but keeping them pinned down. The creatures responded with bursts of energy from their weapons, bright beams of light slicing through the air. One beam struck a hay bale, igniting it instantly. "Fall back," Sarah ordered, grabbing a young man who had frozen in fear. "We can't hold them here." The group retreated deeper into the barn, using the narrow entrance as a bottleneck to slow the aliens' advance. Inside, they had set up a secondary line of defense. Barrels filled with nails and scrap metal, ready to be rolled out if needed. For now, though, they relied on sheer determination to keep the invaders at bay. Jack peered through a gap in the wooden walls, watching as the aliens regrouped outside. They communicated with sharp clicks and chirps, their movements deliberate and coordinated. These weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent, calculating. And they were learning. "We can't keep this up forever," Lisa said, her voice trembling. She clutched a rifle tightly, though her hands shook. "We don't have to," Jack replied. "Just long enough to make them think twice about messing with us." Sarah nodded, reloading her shotgun. "Every hit we land is a message. This isn't going to be easy for them." Outside, the aliens prepared for another assault. Their weapons hummed with energy, and their eyes glowed brighter, more intense. The standoff was far from over, but for now, the humans had held their ground. Each shot fired, each trap sprung, was a reminder that Earth wasn't as defenseless as the invaders had assumed. The desert stretched endlessly around them, vast and unforgiving. It was a harsh place, but it was home. And no matter what happened next, the people gathered in that barn were determined to protect it. "We stay," Jack declared, cutting through the murmurs. "This is our land. If we run, they'll just follow us. And when they do, we won't have any advantage." His words silenced the room. Slowly, heads began to nod in agreement. Even those who had been hesitant earlier seemed to draw strength from Jack's determination. They might not have advanced weapons or training, but they had something the aliens hadn't anticipated: grit. As the meeting broke up, Sarah pulled Jack aside. "You did good tonight," she said quietly, her expression unreadable. "But tomorrow will be harder. Those things out there aren't going to stop until they've taken what they came for." Jack met her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Then we'll make sure they regret coming here." Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, cold and unforgiving beneath the starlit sky. Somewhere in the distance, the hum of the alien ship grew louder, a constant reminder of the threat looming over them. But for now, the humans held their ground, united by fear, anger, and the stubborn refusal to give up without a fight. The explosion had done its job. For a moment, the aliens seemed confused, their glowing eyes darting in all directions as they tried to locate the source of the attack. The damaged scout, a tall, insect-like creature with a shimmering exoskeleton, limped back toward the safety of the mothership. Its movements were slower now, less confident than before. The humans had struck first, and though the damage was minimal, it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in the invaders' minds. Back behind the rocks, Jack Harper exhaled sharply, his heart still racing from the adrenaline rush. He glanced at Lisa, who looked both relieved and furious. "You promised you'd be careful," she hissed under her breath, clutching his arm tightly. "I was careful," Jack replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "And we got their attention." Lisa shook her head but said nothing more. She knew arguing wouldn't change what had already happened. Instead, she focused on scanning the area, her sharp eyes catching every movement. The desert was quiet again, save for the faint hum of the alien ship in the distance, but neither of them believed the calm would last long. As night began to fall, the temperature dropped rapidly, turning the sweltering heat into a biting chill. Jack and Lisa made their way back to their ranch, a modest property nestled among the barren hills. Along the way, they passed other locals who had also seen the alien landing. Word spread quickly, carried by whispers and hurried conversations. By the time they reached home, a small crowd had gathered outside their barn. Among them was Sarah Klein, a wiry woman in her early 30s with short brown hair and calloused hands. She had once served in the military, but left after an injury ended her career. Now she worked as a mechanic in the nearest town, fixing cars and tractors for anyone who needed help. Her presence brought a sense of order to the chaos. "What's the plan?" Sarah asked without preamble, stepping forward as Jack approached. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the fear that gripped the others. Jack hesitated, glancing at the worried faces around him. Most were farmers or ranchers, people who lived simple lives far removed from anything resembling combat. Yet here they were, standing together because they had no choice. "We fight," he said finally, his voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "They picked the wrong place to land." Sarah nodded, clearly expecting this answer. "Good. Then we need to get organized. We don't have much, but we can make do." She gestured toward the barn, where tools, old rifles, and scraps of metal lay scattered. "We'll start by fortifying this place. It's defensible, and it's close enough to see what they're doing." For the next few hours, the group worked tirelessly. They reinforced the barn doors with planks of wood, set up makeshift barriers using hay bales and old tires, and collected whatever weapons they could find. Shotguns, hunting rifles, even pitchforks and shovels were piled neatly in one corner. Sarah took charge of modifying some of the equipment, rigging traps and tripwires designed to slow the aliens down if they ventured too close. Meanwhile, Jack climbed onto the roof of the barn to keep watch. Through a pair of binoculars, he observed the alien ship, which remained eerily silent under the cover of darkness. Occasionally, beams of light shot out from its base, illuminating patches of the desert as the creatures continued their search. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being studied, analyzed like animals in a cage. By midnight, exhaustion began to take its toll. The group huddled inside the barn, sharing stale bread and lukewarm coffee while discussing their next move. Some suggested fleeing to the nearest city, hoping for protection from the government or military. Others argued that running would only delay the inevitable. The sun hung low over the endless stretch of cracked earth and dry shrubs in the Arizona desert. It was a place where life seemed to hold its breath, waiting for rain that rarely came. But today, something unusual stirred the quiet air. A deep rumble echoed across the barren land, shaking the ground beneath the feet of anyone close enough to feel it. Far above, a dark shape descended from the sky. A massive spacecraft unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The ship was sleek and metallic, its surface reflecting the sunlight like polished silver. It hovered for a moment, casting a shadow over miles of desert before lowering itself with precision onto the dusty ground. The impact sent waves of sand spiraling outward, creating miniature storms around its base. For a long time, nothing moved. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, as if even the wind dared not disturb what had arrived. Back on their distant homeworld, the aliens aboard the ship believed Earth would fall easily. They had studied the planet from afar, observing its scattered cities and primitive technology. To them, humanity appeared weak, divided, and unprepared for an invasion. Their mission was clear: secure the planet's resources and establish dominance. What they didn't expect was resistance from people who called this harsh desert home. Not far away, hidden behind a cluster of rocks, Jack Harper watched through binoculars. His weathered hands gripped the device tightly as he observed the towering vessel. Beside him crouched his wife, Lisa, her face pale but determined. "We need to go," she whispered urgently. "This isn't our fight." Jack shook his head without taking his eyes off the ship. "It's everyone's fight now," he replied. "If we don't figure out what they want, no one else will." Jack wasn't a soldier or a scientist. He was just a rancher who'd spent most of his life under the scorching desert sun, raising cattle and fixing fences. But he knew survival when he saw it, And right now, survival meant staying calm and gathering information. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever those aliens wanted, it wouldn't end well for anyone nearby. After several tense minutes, the ship began to hum louder. A section of its hull slid open, revealing a blinding light within. From the opening emerged several creatures, tall, insect-like beings with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. Their movements were smooth, almost mechanical, as they stepped onto the desert floor. Each carried strange devices that pulsed with energy, scanning the area around them. "They're looking for something," Jack muttered, lowering the binoculars slightly. "But what?" Lisa tugged at his sleeve again. "Doesn't matter. We should leave while we still can." But Jack ignored her plea. Instead, he pointed toward an old pickup truck parked about 50 yards away. Earlier that morning, he'd rigged it with explosives scavenged from leftover fireworks and fuel cans. It wasn't much, but it might buy them some time, or at least send a message. "Stay here," he told Lisa firmly. "And if anything happens, drive back to town." Before she could protest, Jack slipped away, moving low and fast across the uneven terrain. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust, but the aliens were too focused on their scans to notice him. When he reached the truck, he hesitated only briefly before flipping the switch that armed the bomb. Then he sprinted back toward Lisa, heart pounding in his chest. Moments later, the explosion rocked the desert. Flames erupted from the truck, sending shards of metal flying in every direction. The aliens recoiled, startled by the sudden violence. One of the creatures staggered backward, its exoskeleton scorched but intact. Though the blast hadn't killed it, the message was clear. Earth wasn't going to roll over without a fight. As the smoke cleared, Jack and Lisa retreated into the shadows, watching silently. The aliens regrouped quickly, their glowing eyes scanning the horizon for the source of the attack. Jack clenched his jaw. This was only the beginning.